Terry. Welcome to the podcast. Really appreciate you joining. Would love to get a little bit of a sense of like your background, what you do at Tipalti. If you could please go ahead and introduce yourself for the benefit of our audience here. That'd be great.
Well, again, thank you for inviting me to be part of the podcast. I do. It's an honor. My name is Terry Larock, and I'm head of procurement, which also includes T&E expense, procurement, of course, and travel, corporate travel that report up to me. I'm at Tipalti, Inc. We are a finance software company, best way to describe it. And we provide financial software for AP Hub, for, again, in purchasing and also credit card payments. We are a global company. We have offices not only in North America, but also in UK, Amsterdam, and also in Israel. Company's been in existence for 10 years. I've been involved in startups. We are a startup, privately held, and I've always enjoyed setting up the procurement teams in startups. So my background is in procurement. I've always had also corporate travel and some T&E expense, and other departments report up to me. But coming in procurement, always enjoyed it, working with suppliers. To me, you use the cliche, they're partners, they really are. They're not bad cop, good cops in environment. They're again, our suppliers, our vendors are really intricate to our success. And I think that's the message that I like to share with our suppliers, that, hey, you're there and we're there. You're trying to make money for your company. We're trying to save money for our company, but we want to utilize the goods and services from our supplier vendors. So I think that is so much fun to work with, to learn different products, different technologies, and also to actually understand how we're going to use the various goods and services to really add value to our companies. So here at Tipalti, that is important that we're trying to do. So again, background is procurement, enjoyed it very much. I do have a master's degree. So basically through education, had fun. People say, well, where'd you go to school? San Jose State and Concordia College for my master's.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks, Terry. Really appreciate you sharing your background. So in terms of you talked about being vendors, a very strategic part of your ecosystem and to Tipalti's success. Can you talk a little bit about your priorities for 2023, given what is happening around us and how that has changed from 2022, just specifically around your priorities that you could talk about?
Yeah, so the big change is that what we found is that, as you know, later part of 2022 and now in 2023, the environment has changed. As you saw, a number of companies have basically reduced their workforce. A number of companies basically have eliminated a number of their departments that they had that basically they hope to build, they're not building. A lot of companies are basically really looking at the budget and really asking the question, what are we spending the money on? What is the return on value of spending that money? That is the key ingredient. So for 2023, yes, we are very budget conscious, but we're also looking at, are we really using what we're spending our money on the most efficient way? And I think that's the key word, is the efficient way. Are we using it? Mm-hmm. And with that in procurement, it's basically spending monies with our suppliers and vendors. So do we really understand when we're basically engaging with our suppliers and I call them supplier vendors, are we really looking at what is our total cost of working with this vendor supplier? And are we really realizing what we hope to be our return on investment, the money that we're spending with the vendors? So I would say we're putting more of an emphasis to understand if we're going to spend money, mm-hmm. we need to be efficient with it.
Yeah. And how are you doing that at Tipalti? If you could educate our audience, because I think what you mentioned is actually top of mind for a lot of our audience, right? They want to understand, hey, first tell me, where am I spending, right? And how do I optimize? How can we have more to the bottom line, right? So I think that's top of mind for everybody.
So what we work closely with our FP&A people, our finance planning and analysis team, and we know what we spent. So we have a spend file. Basically, we have an ERP system. We can get what we spend there per the supplier. What's also important is that using a SaaS tool, which I think is very important, because a large percentage of our spend with vendor suppliers, besides real estate, which is our offices, our leases, is basically on SaaS applications. So what we want to understand is that, hey, contract in place, what are we paying for? Are we using it? That is the key ingredient. Are we using it? And then getting with those people that are using it and really asking the questions, is this SaaS application or is this goods and services fulfilling what you need? And what is the benefit back to Tipalti? Interesting question to ask them, saying, hey, I know you say you need this. Let's say it's a SaaS application. You say you need it. We see you're using it. But what is the benefit? What are we seeing as a return? How is it basically helping you do your job? And is there anything we can add or can we include more on to basically make it more efficient overall for Tipalti? And that's what we're looking to do.
That's great. That's great to hear. Yeah. I think determining the ROI on your spend is the most important thing, and partnering with finance as well as other department heads is key to, quantifying that success or that ROI with the vendors. Terry, do you think given in 2023 where people are getting more cost conscious and they do understand the value as a procurement team that you bring to the table? Because most procurement teams, you're obviously very strategic in nature. You think of your vendors as very strategic partners to business. Do you think companies, other department heads also realize that and they're contributing to your cause here?
I think education is important for our internal business partners, that's what we call them, or for our employees. Mm-hmm. I think what's important is that our internal business partners realize that procurement is the conduit between our supplier vendor and them. That's the key thing. So we're there, and as you stated, we add value. But I think it's important is that we're there to support Tipalti, to meet their budget goals, but also to meet their objectives of why they want to purchase and spend the money for this, let's say, SaaS application. Understand, hey, this is what the application does. Is this fulfilling what your needs are? And sometimes needs change. So we need to then understand, is going forward, are we going to continue using the SaaS application? Do we need to basically set up with this and ask what's on the drawing board of the particular SaaS application supplier vendor and saying, hey, what are you going to be bringing in to enhance the tool that we might want to use, and what, to kind of look at their roadmap. And I think by educating our internal partners, they really appreciate that, because it gives them the opportunity to really review that what I thought I was getting, am I getting? It's an interesting scenario to hear that from our internal business partners.
That's great to hear. And I know, Terry, you, as you said, you're the conduit between the business and the vendors, right? And that's a very interesting spot to be in, which means you have to negotiate with these vendors as well for the best prices. So I know that is a topic that is very near and dear to you. So would love to, maybe if you can get us started on what are some of the things that you follow, and what are some of what the audience should be doing?
Well, I think what's important is for a procurement team, and I'll say the IT team, a lot of times, if you're small, you work together as a group, but sometimes it's separated. A SaaS discovery tool is so important. I cannot say enough, because when you're negotiating on a SaaS application, you really want to understand basically, hey, how many actual employees are going to touch that application? So you know that up front. But then once you basically, and a lot of times what we're seeing in 2023 for SaaS applications, we're asking just for a 1-year annual agreement. Even though there's advantages by doing multi-year, we really are concerned about the the economic conditions that we're running through, and also the environment that we're in, that we're being very strict on our spend on dollars. So with that, by having a SaaS discovery tool, we can actually measure it, saying, hey, we went ahead and committed for this tool. We committed by this X number of user to use. Are they really using it? Are they using it to the full advantage? What I have found in the past is that, we sign up for a SaaS application, we bought, let's say, 250 licenses, and basically, oh yeah, go so, and then we basically, through a SaaS discovery tool, what we're realizing that, wow, what we purchased and what actually is being used is not there. And a lot of times it's a lot less users. We see a lot less activity. That's what's great about a SaaS discovery tool. And by having that information, it allows us, when we do a renewal, to better negotiate, to really understand where we're at. And what I appreciate is the thing I want to bring in is that, hey, this is where we're at. And again, your SaaS application supplier vendors know who's touching the system. Don't be led astray that they don't know. They do know. But also what we know is we want to understand who's using it, how they're using it, how often they're on. And that's what a SaaS discovery tool does. And we use that part of the negotiation. We basically say, hey, supplier vendor, who's using it, how we're using it, basically how often we're using it. Is it meeting our objectives? Is it meeting our business budget owner who actually paid for it? Is meeting their objectives? And also in negotiating, what it allows us to do is saying, hey, based on this, we want to basically base our license on this. If we do grow, which they, of course, your supplier vendors want you to grow, perhaps entertaining into the SaaS agreement that you overall sign is basically having a true-up type environment where if we add users, we'll start here, we'll pay for this, but we have an opportunity that if we add users, we're able to add it at a cost that we've already negotiated and that we can measure.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And in terms of when you said knowing the usage as well as knowing what you're spending on, getting that very easily accessible when you are talking to these vendors for negotiation, right, for the next year renewal. Any other tips that you can share with the audience where they could benefit, somebody who is early on in their career in the procurement space and wants to learn, for software vendors, SaaS vendors, what are some of the best practices that you can share with them?
Sure. Some of the best practices is basically what I recommend, and you need to negotiate this, is be careful with the SaaS application agreement. You really want to be careful on the auto renewal terms, because a lot of times you're busy, the business owner who's using it's busy, the contract comes up, and you don't need the tool. You've actually found that it's not meeting your objectives going forward. But guess what? You're too late. It automatically kicks in because you didn't give a 30, 60, 90 day, whatever is an agreement in that. Give yourself enough time that on the auto renewal, that the auto renew basically can be canceled out if you like, completely eliminated. Take it out, saying we don't want an auto renewal. If you do want an auto renewal, have an out. We're saying that, you can give, in the contract with a 60-day notice, we are able to turn off the auto renewal. And that is so important. That's one thing on a SaaS agreement I think is so important. Also, the opportunity to add users. Now, a lot of times they're not going to let you subtract users, if you have employees leave or something. So you want to have your base number very valid. You want to be conservative, but have the opportunity where if you are growing, you want to add, that you have a fixed price in there in the agreement, that you understand if you do add an additional user license, you have the cost that's basically protecting you on that. The next items, legal will tell you. Be sure that you understand any IP or data privacy issues that you have for your company, especially IP, intellectual properties. What are we sharing on this tool? Does that particular supplier vendor have the proper protocols in place to protect our data, to protect our IP? We work together with legal. That is important. So in procurement, we need to understand that, yes, we have the commercial terms, but we also need to be very, with the legal term, be partner step in step with that.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Terry, for sharing that. And maybe one last question before we wrap up here. So Terry, you have, if you had to give some advice to a younger self who is starting out in the procurement and wants to head up, the position that you have currently, which is head of procurement at such a big company like Tipalti, what would that be? What would you advise them?
Well, first of all, take some negotiation courses. There's a lot out there. There's some free available on LinkedIn. There's other tools that you can use for negotiations. But I says, what you want to do as procurement is realize that we add value. And so we need to partner with two groups, the vendor suppliers, but the other group is our internal business partners, our employees. That's what's so important. You've got to measure both. And you're like I said, you're the facilitator. You're what I call the conduit. And also in procurement, what you need to understand is that what you have spent in the past with the given supplier vendors might not be what you're going to spend in the future. That's what you have to manage. That is so important. We need to understand what we spent in the past, but we also need to understand what we're going to spend in the future. That's important. And then the next item is that you also want to ensure that what you're buying is really going to provide the business owner, the team that's using it within your companies, are they satisfied with what we're using, how we're using it with that vendor supplier that we purchase the goods and services from? That's important in procurement.
Yeah, that's great. That's great, Terry. Thanks for sharing that advice. I'm sure like our audience will find that very helpful, and they will, benefit from your sage, experience that you have had for so many years. Appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.